Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com, and talking to us through a can connected by string. And he's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's where he got the string. He's a freelance film writer. It's Will Ashton. Hey, Will.
What up?
We're still trying to get your audio setup all figured out. Past couple of weeks, you know, you haven't been able to record with your usual stuff. And, you know, I think some of the listeners might appreciate it. It almost feels like I have a collar on for the whole thing. You know what I mean?
I was going to say, I feel looser this way. Like, I feel like I'm, able to be a little bit more agile and kind of improvise a little bit.
Yeah, you don't have to put on your broadcasting voice. You can just put on your Will Ashton voice.
Yeah, which is fitting because for once, and I can't even remember the last time we've had this kind of thing happen, we're talking on the main ep about a comedy film.
A comedy? Wait, Elemental? On a Pixar romantic comedy. Does that mean nothing to you?
Sure. I guess what I mean is a straight comedy.
Like straight comedy. So now it's still Pride Month, Will Ashton, and you would say something like that.
How dare me? But no, it's I can't remember.
A studio comedy?
Yeah, like a studio comedy, like an R-rated studio comedy. Not that it has to be R-rated, but I just can't remember the last time we devoted a main episode to like a straightforward comedy. Like
I hear you on that.
Film. Yeah.
I think during lockdown we might have, because that's when we were at our most desperate in terms of finding things to talk about.
Sure.
But I think I know there have been other ones since, but Bros for sure was one that I think we did give that the main episode.
Nope.
Before
bonus.
that, was that a bonus?
Yeah, we were going to do it for the main, but then we realized that Smile was going to well eclipse that in popularity. So we you rushed out and saw Smile. I had a screening for that one. And then we made that one the main review, and then we made Bros the bonus. Your
memory continues to be unmatched. And I'm trying to think, because I keep thinking of like Blockers. I know that was kind of a big one. But that's 2019. That's so long ago.
No, I think that was 2018.
Maybe.
But it's suffice it to say, we haven't really done a main focus on a comedy. Usually it's like the second or third review if we do review a comedy. I think we did Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar for like the third review in one episode in like 2020 or 2021. But I can't remember. Yeah, it's been a bit since we've even talked about comedy, a straightforward comedy, let alone made it the main focus.
Well, let alone a raunchy comedy, or is that what you mean by, you said sex comedy?
Yeah, sorry, I was grabbing a drink because I thought you were going to talk more. A sex comedy, yeah.
Sex comedy, okay, yeah. You're it's hard to totally make out every word you're saying, so I might have to ask you follow-up questions.
Sure.
Yeah, so I hear you. And part of that is because A, Hollywood doesn't make sex comedies very often anymore, and B, when they do, they don't tend to go to theaters, or rather they don't tend to be big, wide releases, at least to the point where you and I would feel like, okay, that's the big one to talk about this weekend. That's usually how we make our choices. People could argue that, well, John, Will, you should not make your choices that way. You should talk about the movie you want to talk about. But excuse me, that's the business. All right. We're not here to make your feelings better.
Sure.
No hard feelings is the correct title, isn't it?
I feel you're getting ready to say facts don't care about your feelings, which is getting me a little nervous here. Now, here's the question for you. Are they not making sex comedies as much because people aren't coming out to see comedies, or because people aren't having sex as much?
So here's my theory on that. And I think that it's a complicated thing. It has a lot of factors. And in fact, I do think there is an understanding amongst the millennials and Gen X producers out there. There's the executives are all baby boomers, right? And some Gen Xers, and then the producers who are making these things happen, putting these things together. There is an understanding that Gen Z is not that horny, or if they are, their horniness is a type of horniness that the older generations do not seem to understand. And that I'll put it this way. it doesn't really connect with the kind of raunchy Judd Apatow American Pie kind of sex comedy that was all the rage in the 90s and 2000s. And I think sometimes people overstate how established that type of film was. People treat it like it was just another genre like the Western, but if you really look at raunchy comedies, they don't really kind of get their footing until the late 70s and 80s. And back then, they look extremely different from late 90s and 2000s. It is a bit more of a blip in Hollywood history, the sex comedy, than I think people give it credit. Because I think a lot of people who talk about this stuff are like, well, yeah, I grew up on, there's something about Mary. You know what I mean? People grew up on things like Eurotrip and, like I mentioned before, Judd Apatow movies that are R-rated. They go a little harder. But take, for example, Animal House is one of the prototypical kind of R-rated kind of sex comedies, I guess. But that is such a completely different movie from something like American Wedding. They're just totally different, for lack of a better word, animals. And then my other thing on this is that I think the sex comedy has moved over to TV.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Either TV or TV movies. They just don't put these in theaters anymore because over the course of about 10 years, we got movies like Bride Wars. We got movies like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which some of these movies, I know I mentioned 2 Kate Hudson movies. I don't know why I did that. It was not on purpose. But romantic comedies, it applies to this as well. They just started to make these series because they're very marketable. They're cheap to make. And they tend to earn a lot more attention when they're a thumbnail on a streaming app. That's just how it is these days. So that's where my theory goes on that. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little multifaceted as far as it being, obviously, I mean, we mentioned it already, but I mean, studio comedies are just less and less of a thing, as you mentioned. It seems like this type of comedy or this genre has primarily shifted to TV just because studios are a lot more interested in like IPs and like stuff that's like, you know, a movie like No Hard Feelings isn't going to probably have like, you know, sequels and spinoffs and, you know, like a 5-part miniseries on Peacock. It's just kind of a straightforward film. And those are less sure things. I mean, stars are less sure things. And, you know, something like, you know, even one of our rare millennial A-listers, Jennifer Lawrence, hasn't really starred in a theatrical film, I think, since like Mother or Red Sparrow.
Red Sparrow would be the last one. Although technically, Don't Look Up did release in some theaters. I don't know if it was a technical wide release, but it was a substantial amount. It did show up, but it was a Netflix movie, so most people watched that via streaming, to be fair.
Right. But anyway, I think really kind of comes down to, as far as like the sex comedy goes, I mean, it's not really a fun topic to discuss, but I do think there is probably some resistance on Hollywood's part to avoid this genre because of the Me Too movement. They just don't really want to, like, you know, kind of go through some murky waters, make light of, you know, sex when, you know, like...
I don't know if I can agree with you at all on that. I generally don't think they care.
What I'm trying to say, though, is like, it's less about the Me Too movement and more just, I think people have, you know, kind of gone back and they're like, oh, like these comedies don't hold up as well. And it's like, the sexual politics of it are easier to criticize. And I feel like there is a concern, maybe, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just feel like for a Hollywood producer, I could understand in their kind of short-sighted view of it that they would probably want to avoid, you know, just genre altogether if it's not even bankable or, you know, it's not sure if it's bankable and all that. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's kind of a combination of those things. That could be right, could be wrong. I have no idea.
It is multifaceted. There are lots of reasons, but I mean, one thing that I always go back to is the fact that we don't have a summer blockbuster season anymore like we used to. We have a summer blockbuster year. There are blockbusters coming out almost every single week of the calendar year. And what that tends to mean is that we can't really, I mean, these kinds of comedies just can't really compete with like a Marvel movie, another DC, another big animated thing, something that's big IP, something like Crazy Rich Asians, which is based on a book. And I think what that leads to is that, well, okay, we have to have, these movies have to get more expensive because they have to be flashier, and then they have to have stars, and so they have to pay more money for the cast to be bigger. But then the problem you run into there is that a lot of these stars are going to be choosing big IP projects because they're going to get more money out of franchises and things like that. So I think that, you know, you can still get something like a 50 Shades of Grey, which is not a romantic comedy, but I mean, just like kind of like your that's an IP thing, isn't it? It's like, I don't think it totally depends on the genre. I think it depends more on sort of like the hype and the interest around it, and the fact that if you have like an original screenplay or something and you have this kind of concept like No Hard Feelings, this to me, I feel like they could have just made a like 8-episode Netflix series or Max series or whatever, and it probably would have been more successful just in terms of people watching it. Maybe not financially. Although, you know, we are talking about this a while after this came out. We're recording this a bit later in the week, so we can actually take a look at the box office here in a minute. This movie cost $45 million to make. It's made $29.9 million so far in a little less than a week, which isn't the worst, but certainly it's like a sign that, like, yeah, these things just aren't total moneymakers. And it also depends on how much this movie really sort of, how much marketing they put into the budget, which I don't assume that they did a ton, because I don't know. Did you see a lot of billboards for No Hard Feelings in Pittsburgh? Was it all the rage? Everybody talking about it?
Billboards, no. I have seen a number of ads for this film, though, on both in theaters and online. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems to be exceeding expectations financially at the moment. I don't know how leggy it's going to be, but yeah, I mean, I can't say I agree with you about the Netflix thing. I don't know if it would have garnered more viewers or not, but I think the thing that I found so refreshing about this film, and what I think other people are finding refreshing about it, is that it's a film. It's a movie. Like, you know, it's a pretty self-contained story.
Well, we should say what it is. We should say what it's about. So people, because some people might be listening and they're like, well, what are you guys talking about? What is No Hard Feelings? So let's do that. This movie is directed by Gene Stupnitsky. Stupnitsky, I think, actually. Director of Good Boys, Bad Teacher, and co-creator of Jury Duty, which is a good show. Very fun premise.
He worked on The Office too, right?
Yes. He wrote 15 episodes of The Office and directed a couple. And also a writer for Year One, which is terrible. Writer for Bad Teacher. His directorial debut was Good Boys. He directed and wrote this film, No Hard Feelings, co-wrote it with John Phillips. And this movie, as we mentioned, stars Jennifer Lawrence. And it follows the plot of this young woman who is, well, young woman, she's 32. And so she's a millennial. She's like us. And she's an Uber driver. She lives in Montauk, New York, which is kind of this beach town. And it's kind of being gentrified. So people like her who grew up in the town, who's kind of working class, she's being edged out by the tourism industry. So you have a bunch of rich people who are moving to this area, especially in the summer. And she makes all of her money being an Uber driver and as well as a bartender during this sort of season. Unfortunately, she gets her car towed and she is about to lose her house, which she got from her mother. And so she's in dire straits. Eventually, she accepts a very strange posting on Craigslist that essentially says, we'll give you a car if you date our son. The son in question is 19-year-old Percy, who's played by Andrew Barth Feldman. And he's a very shy and awkward kid. And his parents, Laura Benanti and Matthew Broderick, play them. They essentially hire Jennifer Lawrence to date this 19-year-old in order to get him out of his shell, because they're worried that his shyness, his awkwardness, he's never had a girlfriend, he doesn't have any friends in real life, that he's about to go to college, about to go to Princeton, and they just want him to get out of his shell right before that happens. It's the summer before his freshman year of college. So she's supposed to date him, and of course the implication when they say like they want her to date the heck out of him, is that essentially they want her to take his virginity, right? And so you were saying something earlier, Will Ashton, about movies and the Me Too movement and strange sex politics, and yeah.
I mean, I do remember that was kind of a conversation around the film, being like, how are they really going to tackle like a premise like this? Well, of course, I think that's the source of the humor of it. Of course, is that it's this awkward kind of power dynamic, and she's kind of befuddling and not quite able to relate to this younger, kind of more insular generation. But I mean, apparently this is based on a real Craigslist ad. I could be totally wrong, but I thought I read that on IMDb.
I'm not aware of where they came up with the idea. So
sure. Nevertheless, yeah.
So this movie's just come out to theaters, and the reviews have been, well, I won't say what the reviews are yet, because we have the Rotten Tomatoes game afoot. That's going to be coming later. But I'll put it this way. I'll say that, some people have some feelings, some hard feelings about this movie, some don't, and it's a little bit divisive in some ways.
Sure, but I feel like for a genre like comedies, that could also kind of be considered a good thing, right?
It's very subjective, isn't it?
Well, no, not only that, but I mean, like there's all these movies, for the 2000s or whatever, that, or even earlier, obviously, like you mentioned, Animal House, and all these comedies that get bad reviews on the onset, and then people kind of come around to them. I have no idea if that's going to happen with No Hard Feelings. I'd be kind of surprised if it did, but just to say, I mean, if there's any genre that can bounce back from potentially negative reviews, it would almost certainly be a raunchy comedy.
There is something to be said about how this movie is coming out right now. It's coming out in a weekend, the end of June, when its only competition was Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, which did not screen for critics anywhere I'm aware of.
Next week.
Is it not June 30th? Ruby
well,
Gillman?
but that's not the weekend that No Hard Feelings came out.
Oh, you're right. I'm a week late on that. Sorry. So yeah, you're right. No Hard Feelings kind of came out somewhat on its own. Not a lot of competition. I think Asteroid City was opening nationwide last weekend as well. We already reviewed that film. Right. But yeah, it is kind of baffling in some ways because, Elemental came out last week, like with The Flash, and both movies were competing with each other. And then you have Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny coming out this weekend, looking like it's going to have a sizable box office. And here is this kind of raunchy sex comedy sandwiched in between. It's a very weird summer in a lot of weird ways. This is actually, I wish The Blackening had come out this weekend because I still want to see that, and just putting that out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does seem like there is a greater emphasis on studio comedies this summer, or at least in the early to mid months of the year, because there was About My Father, there was The Machine. There was, like you said, The Blackening. Now there's No Hard Feelings, and there's going to be Joyride. So, I mean, I can't speak to how well those movies are or aren't doing, but, I mean,
Joyride is the real deal. Like, that movie's actually pretty great.
You say that.
I've seen it twice, and I'm not saying that you're going to like it, Ashton, because your heart is steel. It's cold as ice, but I know a few other critics who have watched it this past week and are on Team John. And so that's the team you want to be on, because that means you enjoyed the heck out of that movie.
I have no opinion on the film. I haven't even seen it yet, but I just said, I have told you this, and I'll tell the listeners that those trailers are not doing it for me, but I have faith in you. I'll trust your opinion. If that's a movie we review in 2 weeks, is that when it's coming out?
1 week, because we're recording this on Thursday, so it'll be coming out next weekend. And look, no, Will Ashton, you should never trust me. I mean, that. Have you learned nothing? Sure. And yeah, Joyride very much. And it's worth bringing up because for those of you who don't know, Joyride is also an R-rated kind of raunchy comedy. It's a road trip comedy, and it's set in China. And it's about like a few Chinese Americans who go on a road trip through China and escapades and all that good stuff. Stephanie Hsu, Ashley Parker, Sherry Cole, Sabrina Wu, they're the crew. That said, it is very difficult to watch a movie like No Hard Feelings right after, because I have had 2 consecutive like comedy experiences, like going to the theater to watch a comedy, and I'm watching the same movie twice and I'm laughing so much in both of them. And then I go to No Hard Feelings and I go into this movie and I'm on Team Jennifer Lawrence. I'm always rooting for J-Law because I think that she's gotten short shrift over the years, just in terms of, I get it, she's picked bad projects, but I think in even the bad movies she's been in, they're not bad because of her. Like, I never watch a Jennifer Lawrence performance and go like, wow, why aren't you really giving it your all, J-Law? No, it's always because I'm like, why did you pick this script? This script is not servicing you whatsoever. And I think the last movie I saw her in that I really enjoyed was Causeway, which was the last movie she was in. It was an Apple TV movie, though. And so it was one of those ones that not a lot of people watched. It got some awards consideration. That was about it. She and Brian Tyree Henry are a force. And I think you like that movie as well, right?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And then before that, she has Don't Look Up, which I don't think is a great movie, but again, not because of her, not because of Leonardo DiCaprio or Cate Blanchett. It's because the movie is just a bit of a mess. It's a bit of Adam McKay going through some stuff. Before that, we already mentioned Red Sparrow, which I think is just an abominable film. And again, not because of her. And then Mother, I think Mother is like the last time I watched a J-Law movie and I was like, she's in good hands. Like this is my kind of thing, and I go to bat for that one. I know you do too.
Sure.
And then before that, what do we have before that? Passengers, and we have one of American Hustle. We have Joy. I mean, we have her David O. Russell movies, which I genuinely have never been fully on board with.
You're forgetting about her X-Men movies, which are...
I'm not the only one, am I?
Sure.
Yeah, she was in Dark Phoenix. You're right. Dark Phoenix and X-Men Apocalypse before that. And those were just such yawns, I think, for her. I think that genuinely, those are actually instances where she was like, I don't care. But I guess I don't care either. So I don't blame her for that at all.
Right. I mean, particularly the last two X-Men movies, as you mentioned, are like the only times I can really think of her sleepwalking through her performance. As you said, yeah, I mean, it's very evident that she has that kind of spontaneity, that enthusiasm, that, you know, kind of raw but clear star power that, you know, has really made her a dynamic star presence. And I mean, I would say, like, as much as I love a movie like Mother, I can totally understand why she would much rather do a movie like No Hard Feelings than try and make another Mother. It just kind of based on everything that went through on screen and off of that film.
I certainly have been a fan of her Hunger Games movies. I think that she's good in those, and I don't love the last couple of them, the Mockingjay Part 1 and 2, but that was mostly the book. I just don't think the book is quite as good. That said, she's had an interesting career. I think she's going to have an interesting career after this. You know, she produces her movies now. She's produced this one. She produced Causeway. I think she produced Bread and Roses, which is she was just a producer on. She didn't star in or anything like that. But that's another movie coming out this year, and a very small movie. I don't know what she has coming next, to be honest, but whatever it is, I'm always going to root for her. And I was rooting for her in this movie. I don't really like this movie very much. I think it's very average. I think this is just one of those movies where I didn't laugh that much, but I wasn't so supremely bored by it that I wanted to leave every second of it. I was in it. I was like, okay, here we go. And I found a lot of it predictable. But this movie has like just enough moments catching my interest to basically not insult me or make me feel like I wasted a whole time. This is a movie I'll only ever watch once. I'll put it that way. And I think the things that work about it are genuinely Jennifer Lawrence and Andrew Barth Feldman. I think they actually, weirdly enough, like once they kind of get their footing and they start spending some time together and some of the gags start to work themselves out between them, I started to buy into their shtick. And their shtick is very, the thing I like about it is that it's not that pointed. Like it's not fully platonic and it's not fully romantic. It's not even like a really good balance of either. It's almost like a lava lamp of like what's going on with these two. And I actually think it's like really, really interesting. It kind of reminds me of the relationship between millennials and Gen Z in general. And so when the movie was having me think about that stuff, particularly in the sequence where Jennifer Lawrence is like at a Gen Z party and they're really playing it up, those are the times where I was like, this is an interesting concept for a movie. It's not doing it that well, but then you also have a moment where Andrew Barth Feldman, who is I think he's Broadway trained, he gets to do this whole piano cover that is just remarkably good. Like it was just like a really fun sequence. So yeah, there are just little morsels in here for me to feel like I got my ticket worth. But although I did go to a screening, I didn't pay for a ticket. You did. You were at a public screening. I'll say sure. My screening, not a ton of laughs, but people laughed here and there. What was the reaction from your crowd, and what was the reaction from you?
My crowd, I don't know. From what I could gauge, it didn't seem like they were like super into it. Like they weren't like against it. But I remember the woman in front of me kept like giggling at like random things, like not even really jokes, just like people said a line and there's a pause. So it's like, oh, okay, it must be a joke. Like some like weird kind of dynamic. But yeah, I mean, like as it went along, kind of the more outlandish stuff kind of came into play. A couple laughs, but yeah, really didn't really feel like my audience was like super, you know, like it wasn't like they were busting a gut throughout. And I can't say I was really busting a gut either. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot to value about this film, and I was really excited going into it because, as we mentioned, I feel it's been a while since we had this genre, and I've grown up watching comedies all my life. It's probably my favorite genre.
And you went into it knowing like John doesn't like it that much, so you must have been like, oh yeah, heck yeah, here we go.
Right. But no, I mean, I think for the reasons you mentioned, like the main thing was I just was really excited to see Jennifer Lawrence in a movie, and knowing that this was a movie she's been kind of building up to for a while. Not necessarily this film exactly, but I know, from like countless interviews that she's talked about her love of Step Brothers, her love of like goofy kind of raunchy comedies in general.
Just her persona on the talk show circuit. She's a quirky weirdo. And it's so weird to me that she hasn't been a quirky weirdo on the big screen more often. She's been a little bit more serious as an actor in a lot of things, and that's fine. But yeah, she should be in movies like this, better movies. But like, I like this like track. Let's keep going with it.
Yeah, and I mean, as we kind of alluded to, it seems like she's a little bit more selective now. She got married not too long ago. She has a kid. And so I think she's not going to just like make movies unless she really feels a desire to want to make them. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like she really wanted to do this. She was really gung-ho about it, and she just fully commits. And it's just really like refreshing to see that quality that we were talking about of Jennifer Lawrence, where I feel like she's very much a star. Like you can just kind of tell when she's on screen, she radiates. But she has a quality it goes back all the way to like Winter's Bone, where she can feel very like natural and present. Like she can look like a movie star. She's obviously very beautiful, very charismatic, but she also can feel like very lived in and honest to a scene, even like a kind of goofy comedy like this one. So I think she really kind of elevates this better than I think even most of her peers could have. And I think a lot of that also comes down to, again, the commitment that she brings to the role. And I do think, as you were mentioning it, she has sort of a nice, I can't say will they, won't they chemistry, but like some sort of platonic, not platonic, friend, sisterly dynamic with her and Andrew Barth Feldman?
Andrew Barth Feldman, yes.
Yeah. Who I think is pretty good here. I don't think I've seen him in anything else. I know he's still, obviously pretty young and kind of on the up and up. So
he had a guest role in High School Musical, the series.
Oh yeah, I didn't even watch that, but I did remember when I was talking to Matt fairly recently that he said I think he met Andrew Barth Feldman because his brother, if you don't know, Joe Serafini is on High School Musical, the musical series. Yes. So yeah, I mean, good for him. I hope this opens some doors for him. But yeah, I mean, I guess the big issue here, and this is all subjective, but it's just not very funny. Like, it's one of the things where it's like they tell jokes, and there's like comedic set pieces, and like there's room for like funny stuff, but just nothing really like. It doesn't really pop. It's weird.
There are times where they literally leave room for laughs. The very first scene where Jennifer Lawrence is like doing her exposition jokes with the guy from The Bear. I forget the actor's name. I'll look it up here real quick. But Eben Moss Backrack. Yeah, he plays Gary.
I think you mean from Girls.
Yeah, he was in Girls as well, but he's. More people will probably recognize him from The Bear because that's hot and poppin', and so is he. But no, yeah, there's like the whole scene where he's towing her car, and like literally, like she's giving like exposition, and she's doing it in a comedic way, and then there are these weird pauses, and you're like, am I supposed to be laughing during this pause? Because she didn't say anything that funny, and so yeah, it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, and I mean, like the thing I find intriguing is I think its kind of biggest detriment, which is. It's a much sweeter film than I think maybe the trailers and stuff let on, but it's not very raunchy. Like there are like maybe 2 or 3, like if that, like I think maybe even just 1 or 2.
There are very raunchy scenes, but I guess what you're saying is like raunchiness is not its DNA. It just has raunchy like outbursts because like all of a sudden like Jennifer Lawrence will be like full frontal nudity for like a fight scene, and you're like, oh, that's not really what this movie was, but. Okay, now it is. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's like that, and then there's like a later sequence involving a car, which is kind of more bigger and like broader, and like it's going for kind of the more outrageous stuff that seems to be emulating from its peers. But for the most part, it's kind of going for I don't know. Like the film that kept reminding me of weirdly was The Girl Next Door. Because that's also a film with like an older kind of mentor figure for a younger, teenage guy. But that film's like notably more raunchy than a film like this one. But that one also is kind of going for like a raunchy, sweet dynamic that I mean, for my memory, it's been a while since I've seen that film, but I feel like that movie is a little bit better about kind of balancing the, like, you know, the sweet and sour. And this one I feel like is maybe a little too sweet for its own good.
Yeah, the movie I was thinking about a lot was Licorice Pizza, which, you know, different in terms of like
Oy
the
vey.
age difference. Yeah, what?
I said oy vey.
We're bringing that back in. And usually too, I was thinking of the babysitters and it's like, or babysitter, I think it was, where it does feel like when we do these movies where it's like the teenage guy who's like in love with the older woman who's like
Sure.
maybe in her 20s or 30s, it sometimes it gets twisted into a horror movie or a horror comedy. So yeah, it is a little interesting to pivot it this way, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, you could go back to like The Graduate or like Risky Business or something.
Well, I'm talking about these days. I'm talking about like what passes these days.
Sure.
And The Graduate is different in the sense that, you know, she is in her 40s, you know, and that is a totally different.
Sure.
I do think there is a different vibe between like a guy who's a teenager who's in love with a girl who's like in her late 20s to early 30s versus a guy who's in love with a woman who's the same age as his mother, right? Because isn't that what The Graduate was kind of going after?
Yes and no. I mean, I think he's like
Mrs. Robinson was his mother's friend.
Right. No, I know, but like the actors were like fairly close in age. I know that's different, but yeah, he's like obviously he's like a recent high or college graduate, and it's like there's a little bit more of a different power dynamic there. Obviously, yeah, still salacious and whatnot, but yeah, I mean, it's not a direct 1-to-1 comparison, but you know, I feel like weirdly, like every like 2 decades, there's a kind of like film like this where like an older woman mentor kind of you know, kind of guides a young, guileless teen to early 20-something guy.
Well, how about Almost Famous?
Sure.
Because that is a more recent example to what you're saying, but that's one of the great examples of this. You know, and in terms too of like when you're in love with somebody, but you're not ready yet to be in love with that person. You know what I mean? And I think that kind of gets to like what I said in my review. I think this movie's kind of better at being sappy than being funny. Because there are actually moments that kind of tug on you a little bit, kind of get you feeling for this kid. You know, he's not really a kid; he's 19, so they make it a point to be like he's not barely legal or anything like that. But there is still that weirdness. But I think the movie is trying to make something out of that weirdness, not just wave it away.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a balance that the director had with Good Boys. You know, I mean, maybe not like an amazing film, but I feel like that movie is a lot better about being kind of funny or even explosively funny, but having like a real, you know, core emotional sweetness. Obviously it's like Superbad Junior, but it's still like, you know, affecting and sweet.
Yeah. Well, you know the thing about Good Boys. You know who's in Good Boys, right? That's right, Molly Gordon, exactly. And Molly Gordon, you wouldn't believe it, but she's in season 2 of The Bear, which I'm just looking for ways to keep bringing up The Bear, honestly.
I thought you were going to bring up Theater Camp, a movie she stars in and co-directed.
Well, we'll get to that. We will get to Theater Camp pretty soon. And that another, you know, this year has been a year for comedies. You know how hard it was for me to not be able, like how much it hurt to not include Theater Camp in this year's, in the best movies of the year so far list we did for In Between Drafts. Check it out now.
I'm really nervous then if that's the case.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, wait, John likes this? Oh, shoot.
Is it more, I mean, not to get off topic, but just real quick, is it more like Waiting for Guffman or is it more like Glee?
The latter.
Okay,
no, the former.
Okay, then that's pretty good. All right.
Sorry, I mixed up my ladders and formers. But yeah, no, I do want to call out Matthew Broderick and Laura Benanti. Not enough of them. I love them in this. I think that there's like so much potential there. There's so much weirdness of like, I saw some critics rubbing their nose at this and saying like, well, it doesn't make any sense. They're helicopter parents. They've sheltered this kid for so long, but they're also so cavalier about him having sex. And I'm like, yes, like right. That actually, that's A, that's funny. And B, that does feel like enough within the realm of possibility without being like fairly obvious on its face. And the only thing that was bugging me was like, we go through huge stretches of this movie where they're nowhere to be found. And I'm like, this movie should be milking so many scenes out of both them and Kyle Mooney. Kyle Mooney's in here for 2 scenes. What are you doing? What is this, SNL?
pretty good. No, I mean, well, yeah. When you had mentioned stars they didn't utilize enough, obviously I was going to mention Kyle Mooney, who definitely gets some of the bigger laughs of the film, the selected laughs to be sure, but certainly some of the better comedic moments, just purely based on his. It's not like his material's great, but he just makes a mountain of a molehill. But yeah, nevertheless. Yeah, I think with the parents, I think what's appealing to me about it is that it's like kind of examining this dynamic with Gen X parents, which I feel like we've done the death like the boomer parents kind of mentality, but like yeah, like you said, like this Gen X thing where it's like they're trying to kind of be cooler and more open minded and progressive than their parents.
His dad is literally Ferris Bueller,
right? Yeah, exactly. But like also like there's this like thing where it's like they're so loose and kind of like nonchalant that like it's like the opposite effect. It reminds me of in The Simpsons. I know a show you love and dearly watch. Ned's parents.
You said sarcastically. Let's be clear. I haven't watched The Simpsons much.
Right. Ned Flanders' parents are revealed to be these kind of hippie guys, and they're like, "We've done." Well, let me remember the line exactly. It's "We've done nothing, and we're all out of ideas," something along those lines. And it's just like, yeah, these kind of open-minded, but like not really forward-thinking parents who are just kind of just trying to look out for their kids' best interest, but not really doing anything to really progress them meaningfully. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. Again, I feel like the building blocks are here, the blueprint's there, but just like nothing really organically funny really comes out of that to me. If anything, it just kind of reminded me of Funny Pages and how much better that movie is. I feel like about kind of tackling the Gen X Gen Z divide.
I do want to just give Laura Benanti a little bit of extra, attention here, just because she's better known as a theater actor and a TV actor. She hasn't been in a lot of movies. She was in Tick, Tick, Boom, small role, but she's very good. She's very talented. Everything I've ever seen her in. And I think she probably got this gig because she was on a few episodes of Inside Amy Schumer. And of course, Amy Schumer and Jennifer Lawrence are good friends. And so I think that was the connection there. I genuinely believe that she should be in more things theatrically, because I think she has a really good comedic presence. She's kind of like really like, I think the funniest scene in the movie is where Jennifer Lawrence is kind of trying to like get around her age while talking to Benanti and Broderick, and it's actually a well done scene. I was like, oh, this is funny, and I just wanted the movie to keep doing that, to keep going for that same sort of thing, and it just didn't quite. So, and again, it's never that it's like way below the bar. It's not going for huge jokes and then face planting necessarily. It's kind of just going for average jokes and doing them fine.
Yeah, it's it's just the weird thing is that like it's not for like a lack of effort per se. Like obviously Lawrence is committed and all that, but I don't know. It just kind of feels like there's just an absence there. It's like weird. It's just like they're like trying to coast on vibes more than like really kind of doing like joke. And it's just off.
Because you know what? I was trying to think of this too, because Jury Duty is a very funny show. It's a funny show built on a premise where a lot of the comedy is the irony of like, that it's fake. That's a fake jury duty, but the main character doesn't know. He thinks it's all real. That's where the comedy is coming from. And it's almost like Stupnitsky is using like the vibes of that kind of thing. And that's where like, I guess like he wants that same kind of humor to come about of like, isn't this premise funny? And doesn't really like dial in the jokes to be like, yeah, sure, a premise can be funny, but you can't just glide on that, right? And so yeah, this movie's missing a few pieces to it almost. And I guess we're over talking about it, I guess, and we're really harping on it because I think of the potential. I think because like we both want something like this to succeed, and I think they did too. I think there's a reason why like Hasan Minhaj, he's in this for what, like 30 seconds? He's in one scene and then he has like a quick voiceover. You don't get Hasan Minhaj in something unless like, yeah, you have people who are like, yeah, I want to kind of be part of something like this. I think actors do want to be in movies like this. Natalie Morales, who has been so good and so many different things she's done. She gets a few scenes here and like a few gags that are fine. Again, but again, it's sort of like, I think that these folks are just sort of in a movie that it's almost like it's not that they just want to be in a movie like this. I think they all wanted to contribute to make a movie like this successful so more of them can be made. But the way I see it now, it's like, nah, I mean, I think we're just headed toward a future where unfortunately this kind of thing, like people are going to watch No Hard Feelings on a streaming service. Like that's where most people are going to watch this. On your end of things, do you think that's okay? Do you think that people will still get, some enjoyment out of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a film that demands like the big screen, but I mean, the hope would be for something like this that like the outrageousness would be more palpable with like a big audience kind of like laughing and like getting caught up in it. And I feel like that's like, again, that's what's kind of weird about this movie is that it doesn't really feel like it's trying to go for that, but it also kind of is. And so it's just like an odd kind of imbalance that doesn't quite work. It feels just too uneven for its own good. But then again, it's also like such a oddly kind of well-intentioned and like, sweet-natured film with actually kind of like intriguing message about like kind of learning to let go and like moving out of your small town and like kind of gracefully moving into maturity. Like stuff that's a little bit more thoughtful than a comedy like this usually is about its messaging. But again, I just kind of wish that it was able to do that while also being funny. But, you can't have them all.
And I thought it had a decent ending. It's not even that it gets better as it goes along necessarily. It's just sort of that it never gets terrible. And it's sort of like, it's like a heartbeat. There are moments where it like perks up a little bit, goes back down, perks up a little bit. So yeah, that's No Hard Feelings. We should play the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try. I've been trying to kind of figure out how to talk about the nude scene, only because I feel like it's worth complimenting. Because I feel like I'm gonna try to be as delicate about this as possible, but it's rare that we see like women nude scenes done comedically. Like I feel like there's always this like societal pressure to kind of like only do like male scenes as like sexy or like.
You didn't laugh during the nude scene in Red Sparrow?
But no, I mean, like, I like that. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of what was that movie from a few years ago? Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, where it's like the comedy isn't just with women. Like the nudity isn't really just only there to be kind of like sexy or seductive. It's like also there. Actually, in this case, it's only really to be funny and like outrageous and goofy, and just the commitment that Lawrence brought to it. I don't know. It seems like actually like the one thing in this movie that's generally kind of progressive and interesting about it to me. But I don't know. It's not my place to really comment on that per se. But I just find that to be a fascinating decision.
Just wait until you see Joyride. That's all I'm going to say. If you're like, oh, women using nudity to tell a joke, okay, yeah, just put a little pin on that.
I mean, obviously it's been done before elsewhere. I just feel like it's just
I know, but I'm just saying that like if you were just like, oh, we haven't seen that in a while, like, well, you're gonna see more of it, I think. That's all I'm getting at. The movie's graciously short too. It's only 103 minutes, about an hour 40, and you're out of there. And I didn't feel like it was over long. I mean, maybe they could have shaved like 5 minutes, but I'm not gonna micromanage here. And it's in theaters now. I don't know how long it's gonna be in theaters. I saw just today that it's looking like Asteroid City, biggest box office opener of Wes Anderson's career. And it's looking like they're already planning to put it on digital on July 11th. July 11th, just a couple of weeks from now. I mean, we are in a weird place. Like ever since the exclusivity window evaporated, I was hoping that we could all be adults about this and make adjustments, and you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like we've gone to such a, like, it's like, do you not care that this is teaching people to not go to movie theaters and watch these things so we can get more of them?
I mean, that's a weird, Universal is in such a weird place. Like they're like championing like original mid-budget kind of movies like this. I know this is a Sony film, but
this is Sony, yeah.
But, like they're doing like movies like Cocaine Bear and like Megan and, like stuff that's like not like as IP based, like stuff that's like a little bit, good like counter programming, Knock at the Cabin, things like that. But then like they give them like very short like theater windows. And I think it has to kind of do with like in the pandemic, they were like the first. Like I remember Trolls World Tour was like the first one to kind of take advantage of like the VOD model.
All right. Well, I know we could talk about this quite a bit more, but we probably should not, and just get right over to the Rotten Tomatoes game. That's what they've been waiting for, is it not? So, okay. No hard feelings. It's been on Rotten Tomatoes for about a week, and we have 176 reviews counted. Will actually give me your best guess.
Oh, let's see. Based on how you were describing the film earlier, it sounds like it's pretty negative. I know critics...
I could have been steering you wrong. I could have been making it more challenging for you.
That's always possible. I don't know. I feel like... I don't know. Like I said, I feel like even though critical consensus tends to be kinder to some films that maybe critics weren't kinder to in the past, I feel like comedy is still, a very subjective hurdle to get over. I don't know. I could see critics maybe being kind to Jennifer Lawrence's performance, but maybe not kind to the film itself as we were. So I'm going to say 54%.
You are not that close, unfortunately, but just I'll say you're more than 10 points off. But do you think it's higher or lower?
Is it higher?
It is higher. It is higher. It's in the 60s. It's 68%. And it's been fluctuating. It was 66% yesterday. And, so we started this recording on a Thursday night. Now it's Friday, and it changed a little bit. It was actually 66. But we had some technical issues, and we reconvened using the power of editing. But so 68% is the critic score. What about the audience score? What do you think that is? We have 1,000 plus verified ratings.
I could see it being on par with the critics for this one. Like as I was going to say before, I mean, I feel like, I don't know, this is a movie I feel like most people are going to love, but it's a hard film to really get like mad at or even be like super critical. I don't know. I feel like audience are going to like it but not love it, which I think kind of constitutes like a 73%.
This is not your Rotten Tomatoes game, Wash. You're off by 15 points.
Wow.
It's 88%.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the audience is, you're underestimating how much they like, Andrew Barth Feldman's pipes, right?
Sure.
Not that pipe, excuse me. So singing pipes, Will. Get that suggestive grin off your face. Sure. But okay, what about cinema score? The folks in Vegas have had their say. So what say you?
With that in mind, I don't know. It seems like an A- is pretty high for this, but I think it's higher than a B, so I'm gonna have to go with a B+.
There you go. You just needed to warm up a little bit. It is a B+. I think you just needed to stretch. Sure. I don't want you to overextend yourself doing these very important guesses. We'll finish off with Letterboxd, of course. 66,000 watches or logs on Letterboxd so far. What do you think the average rating is? I know you have concerns about the Letterboxd rating system apparently changing and making this more difficult for you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they changed to make it, I think, more conductive to like
the top 250.
Yeah, I mean, well, it seems like, I presume that the reason they changed is because Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse was like number 1 or number 2, and like it was trumpeting films, like Citizen Kane and Seven Samurai and all that. So they kind of changed it so that it's a little bit more lenient, I think, to newer films. Like it's not quite as willing to like run to an estimate, and if it is, it's less high than it used to be. So with that in mind, I'm going to say it's probably in the 3.2 range.
Very, very close. You're only 1 off, or 0.1 off. So do you think it is 3.1 or 3.3?
Well, my feeling is at 3.3, but I feel like if they're going lower now, it should be 3.1.
No, you should have gone with your original feeling. You were trying to logic your way to 3.1. Now it's 3.3.
All right.
Which is not bad, not bad. So friends of the show have spoken. So I see some of them have logged the movie as well. And it's a range. Charlie Ridgely gave it 3.5. Kimber Myers gave it 3.5. They both liked it. Emma Sasek gave it 3.5. So there's some love coming out for this film, unlike Us. And I do see that friend of the show, Isaac Feldberg, didn't put a star rating, but you can read his review for yourself. I won't give it away. You should just read it because he's a great Letterboxd follow. How about that?
Yeah. We got to get him back on the show at some point.
I'm always thinking about it. I'm always wanting to. I see Robert Yanez Jr. also put a heart on the film, not a rating, but seemed to have liked it. So we're in the minority. We should have had a guest on to defend this movie more, right? Because you and I, we had some hard feelings. We could have used a softie like Charlie, right? But okay. That's No Hard Feelings. It's out in theaters now. Next week, we have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. By next week, I mean literally today, because that's how late we are on recording our review of No Hard Feelings. To the point where you and I have both seen this new Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
I've reviewed it for In Between Drafts. You're fresh on the movie. You just, not fresh like critic score, but fresh like you just watched it last night. Right. And, or was it last night or the night before?
No, it was Wednesday. So
it was Wednesday, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know my score quite yet, so you don't know if I'm fresh or rotten on it. But no, I literally saw No Hard Feelings and Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny back to back. Like I went to the theater, I saw No Hard Feelings at a public screening, and then like less than 30 minutes later, I was in the theater seeing Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny.
There are two other movies that are coming out that there's Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, but I don't have any intention on seeing that. I don't know about you, but there are two other more notable movies I think that we should try to cover at one point. One of them being Nimona, which is on Netflix, and I've heard great things. Allie Johnson wrote a great review of that on In Between Drafts. She loved the film, or I shouldn't say loved. She really, really liked it. And there's also still Past Lives, which has been in wide release, and I'm still waiting on you to watch it. And I'm just sitting here on my sofa chair being like, when is Will going to watch Past Lives so we can debate it and discuss it, because he's of course not going to like it as much as I do. So that hopefully is coming soon.
Well, that just came. I work, as I've noted before, at the Harris Theater in downtown Pittsburgh, and we just picked it up. So,
and you are planning to watch it?
Yeah, at some point this weekend I'm hoping to watch it. So I mean, literally, as soon as this call ends, I'm going to go to the Harris Theater, not to see the film, but to work at the theater where we're showing the film. So
you'll be able to do your own cinema score, right? You'll be able to survey the folks coming out of the Harris and be like, it's time for Pittsburgh to take the reins on these quasi-Nielsen ratings, right?
Right. Yeah, because, like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So, like, they're just kind of breaking the golden rule, having these cinema scores. Pittsburgh's a loud and proud city and needs to have its voice be heard.
I like that this has come down to like a purity thing for you. Just like, excuse me, Vegas, you have a catchphrase, don't you?
Right.
But okay, thank you again so much for listening to Cinemaholics. Hang out with us on social media, do whatever you want. And we'll be back next week, or less than, we'll be back in a few days, pretty much, for Indiana Jones and whatever else we can cover. So see you all in the next one from the Internet California. I'm John Negroni.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Washington.
See you next time.
Bye.